Hold up your paws. It's time for another adventure with Bear and Panda in Lisbon, Portugal. They got their passports, they got their tickets, they got their bags packed, and they're ready to go. But what are they gonna do there? Well, that's for us to know and for them to find out. Let's get going! As soon as Bear and Panda arrived in Lisbon, they knew they had to do something special. They'd heard all about the city's historic yellow trams that climb its steep hills, so off they went to ride one themselves. Number 28 is the most popular route and passes through some of the city's most picturesque neighborhoods. The tram rattled and swayed along the cobblestone streets, making its way up to the top of the hill. All the while, Bear and Panda held on tight to the poles inside the tram. The wind whipped through the open windows, making Bear's fur and Panda's bamboo hat fly everywhere. But they didn't care. They were too busy taking in the stunning views of Lisbon. They passed by colorful buildings, cozy cafes, and shops filled with local crafts. They even saw a traditional Portuguese custard tart shop called a pastelaria, but they couldn't stop there. They needed to get to the top of the hill to see the famous Miradouro das Portas do Sol, also known as the Pink Street. From there, they could look out over the entire city and see the beautiful tiles that decorated so many of the buildings. It was breathtaking, and as the sun began to set, the sky turned a beautiful shade of pink, which made for a perfect photo opportunity. With their picture taken, Bear and Panda decided it was time to head back down the hill. They got on another tram and headed to their next destination, the tower. The tower was built in the 16th century to defend the city from invaders. Its thick stone walls and tall towers stood guard over the Tagus River. As Bear and Panda approached the tower, they couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. They walked around the tower's base, imagining what it must have been like to live in this fortress all those years ago. Then they started to explore the inside. There were cannons mounted on the walls, and a museum with exhibits on the history of the tower and the city. One of the most interesting exhibits was a scale model of Lisbon in the 16th century. It showed how the city looked when it was surrounded by water on three sides, and how the tower was an important part of its defense system. After touring the inside, Bear and Panda went to the top of the tower. The views from the top were absolutely stunning. They could see the river flowing below and the city stretching out in the distance. They even saw other famous landmarks, such as the Vasco da Gama Bridge and the Christ the King statue. It was definitely worth the climb to the top. As the sun began to set, Bear and Panda left the Belem Tower and headed to their next stop, Jerónimos Monastery. The monastery was built in the 16th century and was once home to some of the most important monks in the country. The architecture was incredible. The walls were covered in intricate carvings and the ceilings were decorated with gold leaf designs. The highlight of the monastery was the tomb of King Manuel I. The tomb was made of black marble and decorated with statues of saints, angels, and the royal coat of arms. It was a reminder of the power and wealth of the Portuguese monarchy during the Age of Discovery. But as centuries passed, the monastery fell into disrepair. During the 19th century, it was used as a hospital and prison, and much of its interior was destroyed. Today, only a small part of the monastery is open to the public, but even that is enough to make it one of Lisbon's most popular tourist attractions. Bear and Panda walked through the ruins, imagining what it must have been like when the monastery was at its peak. They marveled at the craftsmanship of the old buildings and wondered about the people who had lived and worked here all those years ago. They also visited the nearby church of Santa Maria, which was built in the 13th century. It was a simple building with a single nave and a small choir, but it had a beautiful carved wooden pulpit and a series of paintings depicting scenes from the life of Jesus. It was a peaceful place to end their day. After leaving the monastery, Bear and Panda went in search of food. They wanted to try a local specialty called pastel de nata, which are delicious egg custard tarts. They found a small bakery that was famous for its pastel de nata, and they were in line for quite a while before they could buy theirs. But it was definitely worth the wait. The tarts were golden-hued, flaky, and topped with cinnamon. When Bear took his first bite, he felt like he had died and gone to heaven. The filling was smooth and creamy and not too sweet. He had never tasted anything like it before. Panda agreed. It was the perfect balance between rich and decadent and light and airy. They ate their tarts while walking along the Tagus River and taking in the sights and sounds of the city. They watched as boats went by and couples strolled hand in hand. It was a perfect moment and they knew they would never forget it. But their day wasn't over yet. They still had one more stop to make. After walking along the Tagus River for a while, they came to a park called Park Dasnax. This was the site of the 1998 World S Fair, and now it is one of Lisbon's newest and most modern districts. Bear and Panda spent the afternoon playing on the waterfront. There were fountains to splash in, statues to climb on, and plenty of space to run around. They also checked out the Vasco da Gama Bridge, which is the longest bridge in Europe. They sat on the waterfront and watched as cars and trains whizzed by. They even saw some dolphins swimming in the river. It was amazing. Finally, as the sun began to set, they went back to the old town to get some dinner. They found a small restaurant with tables outside and chairs under colorful umbrellas. They ordered some traditional Portuguese food, including a dish called bacalhau, which is a type of salted cod. They ate their meal slowly, savoring each bite and talking about their adventures in Lisbon. It had been an amazing day, and they couldn't wait to see what the next one would bring. As they walked back to their hotel, they couldn't help but smile. Their trip to Lisbon had been everything they'd hoped for and more. They'd seen amazing sights, tried new foods, and made unforgettable memories. But as they got ready for bed, they started to plan their next adventure. Where would they go next? What new things would they see and do? They knew one thing: their journey around the world was just beginning. When they woke up the next morning, they felt refreshed and excited for another day of exploring. They started off by visiting the Snow George Castle, which is one of the oldest castles in Lisbon. They walked through the castle walls and explored the different towers and courtyards. They learned about the history of the castle and how it played an important role in defending the city over the years. But it wasn't just about the history. The castle also had amazing views of the city. From the top of the walls, they could see the colorful buildings and the Tagus River winding below. It was truly breathtaking. Next, they went to the Miraduro das Portas do Sol, also known as the Pink Street. They remembered riding the tram here on their first day and wanted to go back and see it again. And it was just as beautiful as they remembered. The sky was a brilliant blue and the buildings were a vibrant pink. They took lots of pictures and soaked up the atmosphere. They then headed to the LX Factory, which is a trendy area full of shops, restaurants, and art studios. They loved the unique atmosphere of the factory and all the creative energy that was there. They checked out the different shops and galleries and even did a little shopping. They found some cute souvenirs and local products to take home with them. But no trip to Lisbon would be complete without trying some pastel de nata. So they stopped at a local bakery and picked up a few tarts to go. They found a nearby park and had a picnic lunch. The tarts were delicious, and they enjoyed sitting in the park and people watching. Overall, their second day in Lisbon was just as amazing as their first. They had seen more incredible sights, experienced more Portuguese culture, and made more wonderful memories. But as they got ready for bed, they knew there was still so much more to see. They couldn't wait to start their third day in Lisbon. And that's the end of today's adventure. If you want to see more of Bear and Panda's adventures around the world, please stay tuned. Until next time, happy travels!